Please welcome to the stage the Atlantic's Senior Vice President of Communications, Anna Bross.
Walk on, go.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anna Bross with The Atlantic. I'm our Senior Vice President of Communications, and it's so wonderful to see you all here today for one of my favorite events of this festival, Women of Washington. It's our 15th annual festival, and this has been a mainstay for that time. We have welcomed some of the most recognizable members of past administrations, of Congress, and the media to share their wisdom. Today is no exception, and The Atlantic continues in this tradition, bringing together a group of women who are reshaping Washington on their own terms and making their mark on the future of our nation. Before we begin, I would like to thank our underwriter, Eli Lilly, for their support of The Atlantic's journalism. Please silence your cell phones, but keep them handy. If something you see or hear today captures your attention, we encourage you to share it. Now, let's begin this afternoon's conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
And now, for our conversation with political strategists, please welcome Weijia Jiang, founder of 1063 and senior advisor to the Biden-Harris 2020 campaign, and Sarah Longwell, publisher of The Bulwark, with Elena Plott-Calabro, staff writer at The Atlantic.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to talking with both Sarah and Weijia, who have been in this business a long time, have been working in focus groups, polling, all of that. So lots to get to in these 30 minutes, but I think we'll walk away here having learned quite a bit about the state of American politics today. Sarah, I want to start with you. You have been doing focus groups for time immemorial, and given that one of the biggest stories today is the changing nature of both parties at the base level and sort of what constitutes the issues that are motivating them right now, when you think about the past 8 years, really 2015 to today, what has been the biggest change you've seen in focus groups among these types of voters? Like what is driving them?
Yeah, so just to be clear, I started out in Republican politics, and I actually started doing the focus groups because after Donald Trump got elected, I was like, well, surely this must be a mistake. Like, the party doesn't want Donald Trump. This is a product of a fractured field, and he's, and he was over there in his burn it all down lane and got a plurality. Accident of history, and so I was like, we got to primary him going into 2020. And I was talking to all these people about how they had to be the ones to go primary Donald Trump, and they were like, well, tell me, go do research and figure out if there's actually a lane to primary him. And so I started doing focus groups, and I was like, nope, no lane. Actually, they like Donald Trump, and I've spent too much time in conservative think tanks and at AEI, and the party's totally different, and we all need to start understanding what's happening in the party. And it's interesting, because I did then do them. I don't do them for campaigns. I do them for my own campaigns and my own interests and to keep me from engaging in fantasy politics. And so I do them every week. Every week I listen to two-time Trump voters and go, nope, they still like him. Party's still on this really, really bad trajectory. But in the beginning, there was a lot more like, well, I don't like Trump. I don't approve of Trump. I don't think Trump is moral. I don't think he's good. Over time, both the party changed because Trump changed it, right? People became much more desensitized to any level of corruption. They got dug in. People talk about sunk costs. There's like a real moral sunk cost with Trump. Like at some point, people have fought at Thanksgiving dinner. They have lost friends. They have justified any manner of behavior. And so they're okay with it. And so if somebody else comes along in the Republican Party, whether it's, I don't know, we could probably find a bunch of examples. Let's say Lauren Boebert in a theater, or Marjorie Taylor Greene or whatever, right? Then what happens is people are like, yeah, that's just normal behavior. Things that would have had people resigning 10 years ago, people justify it. The other thing that I really saw is just the absolute devolution on interest in policy. People will say still, I don't like Trump, but I like his policies. Okay, what policies? America First policies.
And
what America First policies? And they usually land on immigration, I would say. Like, that's an animating one. But it's not like they're like, oh, that giant tax cut, I loved that. That was really good. They'll say the economy, but these voters have gotten much better now at articulating what they are against as opposed to what they are for. And I think I came out of a conservative, I don't know, just we're a place where we talked about limited government, free markets, American leadership in the world. There was like an ideology behind it. Yeah, I know, it's like not a thing anymore. So anyway, that's really what I've seen change.
Great. And Alemany, I'd love to ask you a similar question. I mean, it seems like ancient history now that the Democratic Party, the dichotomy seemed to be Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. And now going into 2024, what are you seeing motivating voters?
Wow, I mean, I remember that convention. Don't want to go back there. It's interesting because you were asking like what's changed since 2015, 2016 and Donald Trump coming down the escalator. What's the interesting thing is I think for, majority of the Democratic base or majority of people of color make up the Democratic Party base, right? And in 2015, 2016, a lot of us knew, we were like, we see exactly what this is. Whether you were a black person, you were like, I see exactly what this is coded racism. Whether you were from an immigrant family, particularly Latinos, were like, we see exactly what this is. And then Donald Trump happened, and there was this thing around, I say white feminism had a rude awakening, especially around how Donald Trump became president, what's going on with the Supreme Court, why people didn't vote for Hillary Clinton, like what exactly did you not like about her, right? To the question of what are the policies that you like for Donald Trump, what is it that you actually don't like about Hillary Clinton, right? And so I feel like our party, the primary, and I say this as someone during 2016, I was working for Planned Parenthood, their national office, and we had endorsed Hillary Clinton, but I had always said that I think, the primary made her a better candidate. It actually helped our party platform really be a bit more inclusive for young people. I'm a millennial, older millennial. For folks who just felt as though their politics weren't representing them, there was an opportunity to really shape our Democratic Party platform. And we took some learning lessons from that and grew our coalition, right? And now, I think we were talking about this backstage, we see exactly who Donald Trump is, who this Republican Party is. I mean, you have a whole cast of characters that you can name, right? And in order to make sure that that regime no longer has power, we had to figure out how to build a strong coalition. And that is, I tell people this all the time. I didn't work for President Biden in the primaries. I worked for Senator Elizabeth Warren. And then I ended up working for President Biden, obviously, during his campaign. He is governing in a more progressive, inclusive way. I mean, there are so many historic achievements. That doesn't happen without primaries. That doesn't happen without expanding our base and actually listening to what young people want, what climate change activists want, finally listening to people who are for abortion rights and saying, hey, it's going to be a critical issue for all of our elections. And so that was the good part about the 2016 election that made me a lot more hopeful. And I think a lot of people learned what happens when you have a contentious convention as well.
Sarah, these two-time Trump voters that you are talking to, at a certain point it feels like this is about a feeling, a person, not so much a specific platform. It seems to me that in that case, voters like that would just never be persuaded by another option. Is that what you see, that there is no sort of hypothetical candidate or pitch that would lure them away from Donald Trump?
I do think vibes have started to matter a lot in the Republican Party. We're running on a lot of vibes, and there's the showmanship of Donald Trump. Right now, if you had to, actually before he got as weird as he's gotten, I don't know if anybody caught the debate last night, but Vivek Ramaswamy's hair is getting higher, and he and Matt Gaetz are going to the same barber where it's all forehead and height on the hair, but if people, they obviously the majority of our party is still with Trump. The thing that DeSantis has all the policies. He's got all the policies for the conservatives, but he's got none of the show. And so if you ask reporters who've been running around Iowa, they'll tell you Vivek has a live show going on. I mean, he rapped, he did some Eminem for people at one point. And people are sort of why? I don't see conservative voters liking Eminem. That doesn't feel like it connects, but the showmanship has begun to matter a lot, and also the extent to which people, they want to feel like he's going to say something dangerous. right? Like they want to hear, like, and by I mean that, I mean he's gonna say something like a Mexican judge, or like, you know, the people coming across the border are rapists and thieves. Like Donald Trump started saying things to people, obviously, that lived in the darkest recesses of your mind. That's why it's not dog whistles, it's like dog bullhorns, or right, and that became a kind of show that voters were interested in. They wanted that kind of thing, and so, you know, a Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis or somebody else who's coming along trying to talk about substantive policies just isn't going to get the same look from voters, because they want to feel that frisson of danger that this guy's just going to hurt my enemies, right? This is what I mean about people knowing what they're against more than what they're for, is that more than anything else, the Republican Party has really moved into this space of being anything that the Democrats are socialists, they're bad, they cheated elections, and so I want the hardest weapon to hit them with, and that is still Donald Trump for them.
So midterms, I think, were interesting because we did sort of see that there was a salience with one issue in particular, and that was abortion. Alencia, I mean, you and I talked about how you had worked at Planned Parenthood, but leading up to the 2022 midterms, there were very few people, certainly in the DC pundit class, who believed that abortion would have the salience it would with voters. I would say Vice President Harris was really probably the only person, major high-ranking official, who was steadfast that this would matter with voters. To what degree have you seen that continue to resonate with voters as just like an issue they're thinking about when they're going to the polls as we move into the general election?
Yeah, I mean, it is the issue that people literally talk to me about all the time. I mean, probably because I've spent 6 years at Planned Parenthood, very public position. You know, I will step back and say, and as I was sharing with you, is that when I was working there, the DC political class, even some Democrats, were telling us that abortion is not an election issue. It's not an issue that people are going to vote on. It was particularly white men who were telling us this. And we were like, okay, just wait and see. Let this man get in office and appoint some Supreme Court justices. And then here we are. And now all of them are on TV talking about it was their idea, that abortion should be the #1 issue in midterms, just like men, right? But the reality is, all jokes aside, what I've seen is that in 2022, people learned how to talk about abortion as an economic issue. Every single cycle, people are like, the issue is the economy. And I'm like, duh, stupid. Abortion is an economic issue, especially for mothers, for women, for people who have families who want to have families. It is clearly an economic issue. And so when we started to see the trends and the polling come out, and how it was supposed to be this red wave, and I don't know what I called it on TV, like a little damper or whatever, a little blip in the system, when that didn't happen, it literally woke people up to realize, oh, this is actually directly connected to us immediately losing all of our rights and freedoms, right? Because theoretically, I think we were talking about, you mentioned 2015, 2016, the Supreme Court. At that point, we had lost a key provision of the Voting Rights Act, but people really didn't fully feel that, right? We had a Supreme Court that was going, I would say, emboldening the gun lobby. There were all of these issues that the Supreme Court were making decisions on, but it wasn't until that decision that people realized that I could lose my rights in a second, like literally in a second. And so I think now what you're seeing is, as people prepare for 2024 and they have feelings about individual candidates, they have even stronger feelings about individual issues. And abortion continues to be one of the #1 issues that I hear people talking about. And it's an issue that, quite frankly, has even won when it's directly asked of voters how they feel on this position. Like, look at Kansas, look at Wisconsin. Voters are actually showing up for that issue, even in very red states. I mean, even in Ohio, when Republicans tried to, get ahead of a special election around the ballot initiative, they tried to cheat, and then they got outdone, and people organized, and abortion rights still won, right? So shout out to all the on-the-ground organizers. And so it's going to be a critical issue, and not just for Democrats, not just for moderates, not just for general election voters, but even a lot of Republicans don't think it went entirely too far.
I wanted to ask both of you about that, because this is not just a groundswell of hyper-partisan Democrats turning out to vote on the basis of this issue. I mean, these are people who may well have voted Republican even in the 2020 election. Talk about sort of where the lines are blurring there when you talk to people who are not maybe a natural fit in the Democratic base but are still talking about this issue.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just make one clear example of like how Republicans know that this is an issue. We saw how people talked about it on the first debate, and then unfortunately, Donald Trump, he had an interview on Meet the Press, and he was raving about how he appointed the justices that overturned Roe v. Wade. And in the same breath, he had some very moderate talking points about abortion. And so it's obvious that this is such an issue for moderate and general election voters that the presumed to be Republican nominee is shifting his messaging around it, is trying to take a different stance, although for me, policies speak, your actions speak a lot louder than your words, and we know what policies he would enact. But the reality is even Republicans who want to win are kind of shifting what they're talking about in order to get to that win if they know that they're in a swing. If they're in a swing state or in a general election. You also hear even more Democrats having the conversation about how to protect abortion rights. I'm not going to name any names. There are a lot of Democrats now talking about protecting abortion rights who couldn't even utter the word abortion a few years ago.
Yeah, like something I hear in the focus groups a lot. The first time I heard it, I laughed, and then I heard it so often, I was like, okay, this is actually a position that a lot of people hold, which is people would say, look, I'm pro-life, but I believe in a woman's right to choose. And what they meant was like they're personally pro-life, but actually they didn't like Roe v. Wade being overturned. Like that was a step too far from them, especially actually older women who sort of, that tends to be who I sort of hear that line from. But I do want to pick up on this. We were talking about this backstage, this idea of it is underestimated about how many sort of white working class secular voters, one of the things they liked about Donald Trump is that they thought he was a social moderate. They read his 3 marriages and his sort of sexual, I don't know how to describe what I mean, because it's bad. It's not like little peccadillos. It's like bad stuff, but you know what I'm talking about. And they read that as like, well, this guy's not like a Mike Pence weirdo, and that's where he gets all these barstool sports bros is like now a big part of the Republican coalition. And so Trump, they didn't think he hated gay people or trans people, and they didn't think that he hadn't probably paid for an abortion or 2 in his life. Like they sort of read him as somebody who wouldn't be a social conservative, and they liked that about him, right? And so Donald Trump is able to do a trick that most other candidates aren't, and he will be harder to run against on abortion in 2024 than if Ron DeSantis was the nominee. That 6 months abortion ban that Trump was hitting DeSantis on in that Welker interview, that would be a huge vulnerability for Ron DeSantis. There's a reason he signed that in the dead of night at like 11:45 and hoped nobody would notice except the pro-life groups that he was trying to keep happy. Donald Trump is going to be able to say, I appointed all those judges and you love me for it. I overturned Roe v. Wade, and I would never sign a federal abortion ban because I'm a normal guy. And he's going to be able to take that issue, I think, to a place that's tougher for Democrats.
Let's talk now about not so much what is breaking through to voters, but what isn't right now. I've spent a lot of my reporting the past few months talking to Democratic pollsters in particular who have said to me, the word that keeps coming up is they're mystified, that they'll talk to a group of voters, whether it's young people or they focus on minorities, and they say, did you know that Joe Biden signed XYZ into law? And they'll say, I had no idea. I hear nothing about it. It's not for a lack of coverage necessarily, but what are those dynamics where you have an administration that is, for example, investing more in infrastructure since Eisenhower? Why, Alencia, is that not reaching voters? And is there anything that can actually be done when you do have the campaign at this point, spending millions of dollars trying to accomplish exactly that, but we're still not seeing it?
Yeah, we don't have a lot of time to talk about how we're not reaching voters. And to your point, there are a lot of organizations that have like the same intel from focus groups of when they break down these policies that President Biden and his administration have put forward, voters of color, young people are like, oh yeah, that impacts me, I support that. And then we get them to the point of, would you vote for him in re-election? And they'll say, okay, yes. The hard part right now is how people are consuming information. Donald Trump, and I would step back before Donald Trump. You had a President Obama, once in a generation type of candidate. And a lot of people got the political bug and wanted to pay attention to a President Obama, right? That's when I started in politics. So you had this cultural phenomenon with President Obama. You, for better or for worse, probably on the worst side, you had a cultural phenomenon with Donald Trump. And to this point that you're talking about with this toxic masculinity that he has brought to the mainstream, people are identifying with it. That bravado speaks to some folks. So it's actually kind of hard to talk about just normal policy and politics in mainstream And then the way, again, our culture consumes information. I do a lot of work with the entertainment industry, and folks are always like, well, that's just frivolous. I said, well, actually, no. That's how you humanize people. That's how you humanize issues in a way that actually reach voters more so. There's all this research that shows it reaches voters more so than political ads. And that's how people understand policy and politics. And so when you have folks listening to the cultural outlets, more so than the news, I hear voters are turned off sometimes by cable news because it's nonstop Donald Trump coverage. He doesn't care if it's good or bad coverage, but it's coverage of him versus having deep conversations with voters who you can interrogate. They may not like the candidate or they may not like the elected official, but let's actually talk about the policy. We're missing some of that. There's a lot of deficit there, and that's why I think there's been such a rise on, I know there's been such a rise on TikTok and YouTube with all these explainers. And you can tell that TikTok is a powerful messenger when you have candidates engaging with TikTok influencers, and then you have the powers that be, the minority rule that wants to stay in charge, attacking TikTok, right? Because that's reaching people in a way that traditional media isn't. And so it's going to be a challenge. I love a challenge, but it's going to be a challenge in 2024 to pierce through all those different messages to meet people directly where they are on the issues that they care about, right? We can't be so candidate and elected official forward. We gotta be issue-based, issue forward, because a lot of voters, particularly on our side, are issue voters.
I just have a super strong opinion about this, which is, and this I say this as somebody who desperately needs Democrats to do well and to help build this big, broad pro-democracy coalition to sort of stave off this sort of dangerous version of the Republican Party. But I am astounded at the way that Democrats do messaging or don't do messaging. So let me just say, I don't know if people are mad at me or if they're agreeing with me, but let me just say this one thing.
You all have one message, we have 500.
Oh, I did not fully appreciated the extent to which when you guys are like a coalition, because Republicans do benefit from the homogeneity of their voting blocks. But let me just tell you who I don't like. I do not care at all for Gavin Newsom. Okay, just me personally. We don't have to agree or disagree on that. But Gavin Newsom, I was watching him on Fox News last night, fighting with Hannity, and I was like, why aren't there 1,000 more Gavin Newsoms out there making the case for Joe Biden? There is no surrogate game, right? Donald Trump, when I listen to Republican voters, one of the things they say, they think Donald Trump was a terrific president. They think he was good. And you know what they think? They think the economy was awesome under Donald Trump. Now, let's not even debate the points of economics, but let's just remember whether or not what Donald Trump did. He went out there and he was like, hey, you, best economy for women, best economy for black people. Hey, buddy, how's your 401k doing? And every other Republican on down the line repeated those things. They all, and we moved they could just rattle through the achievements. We moved the whatever to Israel, and they had all of them. There is silence from Democrats. And you listen to Democratic voters, and they are like, I have no idea what was in the infrastructure. The only thing they knew about the infrastructure package was how much it cost. That was the sticker price was in people's heads, but not what was in it, not what they were getting for it. You listen to young voters say nothing's been done on the environment, nothing's been done on this or that priority. And I just don't know where people are talking about, well, Joe Biden shouldn't run, we should get Gretchen Whitmer or Warnock or whatever. Fine. If you want to have these other stars of the party, and I think there are people, they got to get out there and they got to make the case for Joe Biden. They got to show that there is a younger, multi-generational, multi-racial, multi-issue priority coalition out there ready to fight for them and talk to them. And Democrats don't do it, and I do not understand it because we really need it in this moment.
Yeah, I agree.
And like you're saying, Sarah, I mean, this is not rocket science necessarily. Is there anybody in the Republican primary field right now who has a chance at sort of achieving even a fraction of the ubiquity that Donald Trump has when it comes to messaging?
No, and look, there's a bunch of factors, and we've been sort of litigating them for a long time now. But his baked-in celebrity. I mean, this was one of the things. I never watched his stupid show, The Apprentice, right? I'd never seen it. And when I started doing focus groups, and I was like, how many people here have watched The Apprentice? And everyone was like, me. They all already knew Donald Trump. And even, even there was this period of time when I was doing focus groups like 11, 12 months ago after 2022, there's all these DeSantis curious voters. They liked him. They were interested in him. They maybe wanted to move on from Trump. But like the relationship with him was really shallow, right? Like the second that he got on the debate stage and seemed like a kind of wooden weirdo, or like as soon as Donald Trump started attacking him, they just didn't have a deep relationship with him. The depth of the relationship with Donald Trump, like I said, tons of sunk moral costs, been defending him for a long time. And so I actually think, and like in the focus groups, one of the craziest things, I could tell the moment that DeSantis was done because people started saying, he's like a regular politician. Because they don't want a regular, this is what I meant about vibes in the show when I was talking earlier, is like they want, and why like somebody like Vivek, they want an outsider. Like the Republicans have done so much now to destroy people's confidence in institutions, including their own, including the Senate, including the House, that's why all Republicans, they're like running against themselves. They're running against expertise. They're running against their own, length of service or whatever. And so I think that the chance of somebody who comes after Donald Trump is like Don Jr. or Ivanka, or like somebody out of left field, out of entertainment, because it's just, that's like what they want now.
Valencia.
Elon would be like, sorry, you decide.
I don't think any entertainers would run for office, Democrat or Republican.
But like Tucker Carlson is a much more likely successor to Donald Trump, sorry, but that's a true thing, than like Nikki Haley, God bless her. Yeah, that's right.
Valencia, let's pretend the current Republican primary field, other than Donald Trump, is running for president and not just Donald Trump's vice president. Who would Democrats fear most in the general election?
Well, it's the politician that sounds like a normal politician. So I live in Virginia, and we have Glenn Youngkin, and he sounds like, oh, he's not crazy like Donald Trump. And I'm like, yeah, but the Republican Party is made up of these Trumpian policies. So whether you govern like a Glenn Youngkin, or you show yourself like a Glenn Youngkin, or you show yourself like a Donald Trump, in order for you to be a successful Republican at this point, you're beholden into these very extreme policies. And so for Democrats, the problem are those non-Donald Trump characters who have even more extreme positions. And so as we were kind of talking about before, DeSantis became kind of weird and crazy, he is that. Mike Pence is also that, right? A very, a stoic politician who has been in the office been in several different offices. I know how to talk across the aisle. I know how to get people engaged and believing that I am a serious politician, and yet you are even worse than Donald Trump when it comes to the policies. And so that, for me, is what I think the Democratic Party, we continue to look out for, as well as how the Republican Party tends to, and I know we don't have enough time to talk about this, but the candidates, particularly the black candidates that they trot out there. When I think about the Herschel Walker candidacy, I don't need to go too far into that. I made enough comments about that in 2022. But, as Republicans are trying to get, maybe some black voters, particularly some black men, they're trying to get Latino voters, they're trying to get some women voters, they're actually putting out people that may identify with those communities but do not believe in the policies that will actually help those communities. And it's a really challenging issue to kind of thread through and talk about on a debate stage. You don't have that much time like we have on this stage to talk about it. But those are the candidates that really concern me, because people say, well, hey, look, I'm not racist. I voted for this black candidate. I'm not sexist. I voted for this woman candidate. And yet that woman candidate or that woman senator, she actually voted to confirm Amy Coney Barrett, right? And Brett Kavanaugh, right? So those are the actual candidates and the electeds that Democratic Party is concerned about.
Last question for you, Sarah. Who do you think is a candidate that would resonate with the people that you're talking to and might actually pull well against Biden?
Oh, I think Nikki Haley would. If Nikki Haley could be normal Nikki Haley, like 2015 Nikki Haley. I don't know if you've seen the head-to-head polling. Her head-to-heads with Biden, she's up 5 points against Biden. And I think that if Nikki Haley was running the way I think Nikki Haley's always dreamed of running, which is as the new generation of Republican candidate, the governor who took down the the Confederate flag in her state, who has an immigrant story of working hard. I think that who has a ton of foreign policy experience. I mean, even in that debate last night, which was such an embarrassing spectacle, she, you could tell like she's a person who has substance, who like knows a lot and like is deeply offended by like Vivek Ramas. I mean, at some point she was just like, "We are all dumber for having listened to you," and I was like, "I've been so mad at you, Nikki, but like that's right. I'm so glad." But she compromised so much of herself for Trump. This Faustian bargain that they've run, and now she doesn't seem like herself either. And so I think that 2015 Nikki Haley would crush. I think 2023 Nikki Haley doesn't quite know who she is, and that it's hard for her. But I think she'd do well.
Okay, great. Well, we have 59 seconds left. If there's any closing thoughts that either of you would like to make, but I guess really the question to wrap this up is this almost certainly going to be Trump versus Biden?
Oh, it absolutely will. And not just because we're in a different phase of this pandemic will it look different, but it's going to be different, especially because what you said, it's not just this piece of voting against. Now, Democrats, we have to do a really good job of communicating what you're voting for because folks know what we're voting against.
If I have not said this to you and I only said it backstage, have I said anything about no labels?
No.
No labels is not good. No labels, the people that no label, like there's a lot of, even for somebody like me, I could get like, Larry Hogan, yes, my Saint Larry. I would love to see that, like, he will re-elect Trump. Running a third party right now will re-elect Trump. The people, Democrats will not vote for a third party. Republican Trump voters, they will vote for Trump. The people who will vote for a third party no labels unity ticket are like the 7% of right-leaning independents and moderate GOP voters who have been voting against these extreme candidates who are part of not the pro-Biden coalition, but the anti-Trump coalition. And you need them to win. And if that third party, if there's a big third party effort, it will be a disaster.
Well, thank you both so much. You're both brilliant. It's an honor to be able to get to share your wisdom with the crowd. And thank you all so much for joining us.
Yeah,
I hope this was edifying and great.
And now for a session produced by our underwriter, Eli Lilly, on Women in Alzheimer's, Readying Our System for Care, please welcome Maureen Jaffa, Executive Director of Lilly Neuroscience Corporate Affairs, with Megha Garibaldi, Chief Growth Officer at The Atlantic.
Hi, everyone. I'm Megha Garibaldi. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at The Atlantic. And today we are going to talk about Alzheimer's, a devastating disease that impacts more than 6 million Americans. And by some estimate, that number could be 13 million by 2050. Fortunately, there's been a ton of progress within the Alzheimer's landscape, and we have Maureen here with us today to talk about just that. Welcome, Maureen.
Thank you, Megha. It's an honor to be here. I'm thrilled to be here to have a chance to talk about Alzheimer's and some of the advancements we've seen. I've been working in the health policy space here in DC for well over a decade, but have only been at Lilly working in Alzheimer's for the last 3 years or so, and it's been such an exciting time to be in the Alzheimer's space. And I'll say I've worked across many different disease states, patient groups, and there's something unique about the Alzheimer's community, just the challenges that we face, but also the optimism that we have right now. And it's just been, I feel really lucky to be involved in this at this time.
In my preparation for this discussion and researching the Alzheimer's landscape, I understand that there have been recent FDA approvals that could potentially change the trajectory of this disease and positively impact the people and the communities. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. After so many years of failure after failure, it has been incredibly exciting to see. We've had over the past, there have been 2 new approved drugs, not yet from Eli Lilly. We have a product that's under review at FDA, so we're optimistic about that as well. But a lot of times people think of Lilly as a diabetes company, but we have been working in the Alzheimer's field for over 3 decades. And over that time, have had many negative trials. I've learned we're not supposed to call them failures because it's not a failure because we learned from each of those negative trials. and put those learnings out into the community so that we could get to the point where we are today with the huge advancements. And so it is really exciting where we're at right now and the opportunities that we have and the hope that there is for patients and their caregivers.
Given that this is the current status, do you think the healthcare system is primed to support all of these advancements and deliver on this promise of making people who have Alzheimer's their lives better?
So it's a really good question, a really important question. With all of these advancements that we have made, there is a lot that we need to do on the system side to ensure that every patient who could potentially benefit from these medicines is able to access both a diagnostic and also potentially those therapies. One analogy that I have found very helpful over the years is that we are where we are today. You think about where we are today is like where oncology was 20, 30, maybe even 40 years ago. And if you think back then, the types of treatments that were available compared to what we have now, if you think about the stigma, right? There used to be, you called it the C word. And today, stigma is a huge issue in Alzheimer's disease. There are patients who don't even want to have that conversation with their loved one or even go to the doctor. We've also heard stories about doctors who are reluctant to even make the diagnosis because it feels so hopeless. And we're starting to change that and recognizing the importance of ensuring that we get that timely diagnosis, are able to give patients those options. I think some other system-wide challenges that we've seen are really around getting that timely diagnosis, right? So we all know you get your mammogram, you get screened at certain ages for colon cancer, others. And that's not as routine, right, in Alzheimer's, getting that cognitive check. And that's something we at Lilly and certainly across the board, other stakeholders are actively working to see how we can change to ensure that people are willing to go get those timely diagnoses, know what conversations to have, and then be able to do something with that after. And I think that's probably the third piece in these system challenges, is ensuring access to therapy. So there are a lot of barriers out there that can prevent patients from getting access to even FDA-approved medicines. And so that's something that the patient and advocacy community has been working really hard on with folks in industry and elsewhere, on the Hill, everywhere here in DC, to try to address, again, so that we can reach as many patients as we can who can benefit.
Well, it's great to hear that. Can you talk to us specifically about the role of leadership in all of this and women in particular?
Absolutely. So it's very apropos that we're here in the Women in Washington event and talking about Alzheimer's, because it really is, there are so many amazing, incredible women in leadership roles in every aspect that touches this disease. From the head of the Alzheimer's Association, Joanne Pike, leading the grassroots and patient advocacy efforts, to bipartisan leaders spanning the aisle in Congress who have been speaking up on behalf of their constituents and women in particular. In the administration, we have Chiquita Brooks-LaSure leading that division, addressing access issues. And even within Lilly, the head of our business unit, Ann White, addressing all of these issues from the business side, but down through the incredible women researchers that we have on board. And I think it's sort of inspiring in a way, because Alzheimer's does disproportionately affect women, not only the patients who are diagnosed, but also as caregivers. We know that women carry that burden a lot, not only for their loved ones, their ailing parents, what have you. So it's really important to make sure those perspectives are brought in at every level of leadership in addressing this disease.
And I know while we were waiting backstage, we were talking about our career paths, and you spoke about how you were formerly a lawyer and you sort of pivoted, and you were talking about how inspiring it is for you. And I was just wondering if you could also share with the audience.
Yes, I will say that this is much more inspiring than doing taking a deposition way back when in product litigation. So, but truly, and I think Alzheimer's really has been a uniquely inspiring place for me personally. I will say, just a couple nights ago, I was at another event here in town, and there were, at our Lilly table, there were 3 individuals who are living with Alzheimer's disease seated at our table. So I think, and I'm guilty of this too, you typically tend to think of someone with Alzheimer's as that person in the nursing home, right? But these were people who I was having conversations with, who were thanking me, which felt absurd, but for the hope that these advancements have provided them and how they're sharing those stories with other people. And I told them, well, really, I should be thanking you to like be bringing this, so crystallizing this for me about the impact. And I think that's one thing we really want to change at Lilly is helping people understand the face of Alzheimer's. This is that, and helping people have those conversations earlier, and realizing that if we can get at this disease sooner, we have so much more hope for extending that life and ensuring you have good time left with your family members.
Finally, just as we wrap up, any final thoughts that you would like to leave us with?
I would just say again, it's just an inspiring field to be a part of right now. There is so much exciting change. We're on the cusp of so many exciting advancements, and I think we're working hard to ensure that the system moves with it so that patients and their families can benefit from those advancements. And I know I'll be keeping the patients I met the other night at the forefront as we move forward.
Well, thank you so much for this. And well, we have a whole slate of other discussions, and I hope everybody is plugged in and enjoying themselves.
For a conversation featuring DC Power Players, please welcome Jen O'Malley Dillon, Deputy Chief of Staff, Biden-Harris 2020 Campaign and Political Strategist, and Natalie Quillian, Deputy Chief of Staff, Biden-Harris 2020 Deputy Campaign Manager and Political Strategist, with Elena Plott-Calabro, staff writer at The Atlantic.
This time I have two deputy chiefs of staff in which, marginally important positions. So I'm really grateful to you both for taking time to come sit with us for this. Kind of the dynamic of this panel will be, these are two women who are in incredibly kind of stressful, high-powered positions who also have young children. And believe it or not, in the year of our Lord, 2023, that is kind of a novel paradigm for a White House. And really being able to untangle those layers and learn more about how they do it would be great. Okay, so Jen, I'd love to start with you. You've been managing Democratic campaigns for a long time, most recently President Biden's in 2020, but now you're in the White House. Can you tell us a bit about your path to that?
Yeah, it was a wild path. I don't know that too many people end up in the White House having never worked in government at all, but don't be alarmed. I've been there for 3 years. So I have a much better handle of it. But I mean, look, I think that when you do a job like Natalie and I both have in the White House, everything that you've done in your life really prepares you for the rigor of it, how dynamic it is, and how, frankly, you have to do everything, no matter what comes in front of us. One day we could be focused on a trip. The next day you could be focused on, policy implementation. The next day you're focused on, getting ready for a potential shutdown. And most of those things, certainly people before us have gone through, but never for President Biden and never in 2023. And so I think part of what prepared us for this, and we both lived through the campaign and the White House together, is that you just really have to be flexible and know that everything that you're doing really requires you to learn it fresh and to think about it new and to do it in a way that makes sense for the team that you're building and the work ahead. And I think that just means to be women and moms help you be quite flexible and be able to juggle it. And I think all of that really plays into what we've been able to do in the White House.
Natalie, going off of that, you have been in the White House before. Yeah. So talk about coming into this role and the ways in which kind of you've seen your day-to-day differ from what it had been in an entirely different administration.
Yeah. Well, I think this is now my 9th year in a White House, which just means that I am unemployable, I guess, outside a White House. But as Jen said, there's similarities, but there's a lot of obviously differences, and we face a lot of unprecedented challenges. We both worked on the campaign, and we got through that. We got through COVID, and then we entered a White House where we had to do a ton on the COVID response, which was my first job in this administration. And those were challenges we'd never faced as a country before, that no White House, no Democratic White House had faced, and we had to really think through how to do something differently and build as we were sort of responding to something that was killing thousands of Americans every day. And so I think that's just one big, massive example of how, every experience is different. And as Jen said, everything you've done has sort of leads you up to be able to respond to these things. And for me, it was a lot of, I sort of grew up professionally in national security, and a lot of those skills, but also a lot of those assets that are across our government we brought to bear in COVID response. And so I think that certainly helped as we move forward. And now we are all here having this conversation, which we could have done, 2.5 years ago.
Right. Jen, what are specific things that you learned in your time on the campaign trail that you have found particularly useful in your White House role?
Well, I think being a campaign manager is pretty unique. Being a campaign manager during COVID, where I was in the attic with my house for the whole campaign, with my kids who were in COVID school right next to me, and Natalie and I worked together for the first time. Never even met in person for well into the tenure because it all came in during COVID. And so, I think being a manager really requires you to stay focused on the mission and stay focused on the end state. In a campaign, you have one day, and that day determines whether or not you've been successful or not. Now, I would argue there's lots of other ways to determine success, but that was a pretty important one, especially when we believed democracy was at stake. And so as we built the campaign and as I thought about the role that we all had at the senior level, trying to figure out how do you do the day-to-day work of just the block and tackling of your responsibilities, but never lose sight of where you're headed, never lose sight of what the mission is, the strategic imperative that we had, and that you really have to make sure that you're also bringing your team with you. And that was incredibly hard during COVID. And I think those lessons, I come from teams. My whole ethos is being on a team and leading a team, and I love that. And I think coming into the White House and being in COVID, where we couldn't even meet in person in the early days. Don't forget that we didn't have vaccines when we first got in there. So how do you build culture? How do you handle something that we've never been through before and stay focused on these incredibly difficult tasks? Building a White House for a new president during COVID, none of which you have done in this environment, tackling really significant problems, and also staying focused on the mission for the president of delivering for the American people, never losing sight of who we were fighting for, finding ways to get things done. And I think while these jobs are completely different in many, many ways, thinking about that from a management standpoint and from a team standpoint, I think are very similar and help allow all of us to work together in really demanding environments.
I'd love to know the same from you, Natalie.
Yeah.
Your time on the campaign trail as a deputy manager, how those skills transfer.
Well, it was my first campaign, and I was about 40, and so I had a different sort of career trajectory than Jen. But for me, I met Jen for the first time interviewing for the job on the phone, so we didn't meet. For me, this was obviously a pivotal moment in our democracy, and so I, obviously was thrilled to be asked to be part of it. One of my responsibilities was COVID and how do we operate a campaign during a pandemic. And that was really, really hard, and it took a ton of creativity to make sure that we showed what the president-elect then, or the candidate, was about, but not being able to be in person. And we've never done that before as a country, but also sort of demonstrating by our actions that we took this very seriously and that we took the health and safety of our team, but also of the American people at the forefront of what we did. That creativity, I think it's similar to what Jenna said, we took into the White House. And so how did we do our policy making, not just our operations, but our policy making on the COVID side, and get as aggressive and creative as possible to deliver for the American people? So mass vaccination sites, which now we're like, duh, of course you would do a mass vaccination site. That was unheard of before. And we stood up these mass vaccination sites really in a matter of weeks. And I say that goes to just how rewarding government work can be. And especially at the federal level, you often do work. You work on a piece of legislation, you work on some long-term strategy that maybe never sees the light of day or never impacts the American people. But when you get to work in this administration, and especially in COVID, but I would argue in a lot of the work we're doing now, you see those impacts now. You see people getting vaccines, getting back to work, getting jobs that they lost. And that's the sort of rewards that I think we all get into public service for in the first place.
I'm so glad you've both touched on sort of the government by Zoom that really was life in 2021 after Joe Biden was sworn in. I'm really not sure that a lot of Americans appreciate the degree to which, I mean, more often than not, y'all couldn't be in the same room with the people that you were trying to enact these incredible like structures in place and things like that. Can you give us more of the flavor of what your day-to-day was and sort of how y'all were handling restrictions while trying to do something, as, banal, I guess, as running a White House?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't put my brain back in the early days. Like, I remember the first day we were going into the administration, and we had to meet at the zoo to then take a bus, and that was like to get to the White House because of security. It was the first time I'd even been with a group of people for a very long time that were not my family. But look, I think it's, in some ways we learned how to operate in different ways than we ever had before, and we were able to be successful. One of the things that I really reflect on the campaign was being on Zoom and seeing people's lives behind them. Yeah. Seeing their kids, whether you were a mom or a dad or whatever, your dogs, all of your messiness was right there. Mm-hmm. And I think that created a connection that you don't get when you're in a business or you're in any kind of work setting. And I thought that was really special, and I try to hold on to that. And then you come to the White House, and we really, from day one, we were all there. And we had to figure out what's the right process, how do you make sure you have the right number of people, how do we ensure that everyone is healthy? Testing daily, masks daily, how do you keep 10 feet from the president or principals? How do you think about a process for bringing people in? Because most important was to continue to maintain a connection. And for the president, many of you know this about him, but President Biden gets his energy from people. He loves being with people. That man will work a rope line for hours on end if we, anytime he can, and even if we're like, no, we have to go, because he just loves being with people and connecting with them. And I think that was probably the hardest part on the early days. So for us as staff people, you both have to figure out, okay, well, how do we handle this? How do we make sure everyone is safe? How do we make sure we have really strong mechanisms in place so we have a great process? And then how do we allow the president to have everything he needs to do the job he has, which is the hardest job ever, and to be able to connect with people in that same way? We have a studio at the White House that we never would have had before, so that we could always talk to people no matter what and no matter what we were going through. So that's just a few examples of it, but I think it certainly allowed us to do our job, but to do it in a way nobody had ever have, and I think we're all better for it because we were able to build both our relationships with people, but this connection to people in different ways that we still look to find.
Yeah. And Jen, what did that messiness look like for you? I'd love to talk more about, you're not just doing the job of deputy chief of staff, but you are a mother to young children. So whether it was in those early days with COVID restrictions, and now as we have gotten to move past those, thank God, how do you balance the two day to day?
Okay, well, the whole reason I'm here is to talk about this because I work so much that I never leave the White House, but I just think it's so important that moms and women that are professionals talk about how you balance shit, because the bottom line is you can't. And so it's all about sacrifice. And I think we have to talk about it as women. I think when I was coming up in this business, we were taught to believe that you can't talk about your families. You can't say, I'm going to be late because I have a kid thing. And the president believes that's unacceptable, and I think it's so important. So let me tell you about how messy my life is. My daughter is up there, one of my daughters. I have 3 kids. I have 10-year-old twins and a 5-year-old son. And Mary up there broke her wrist yesterday. And so I wasn't sure if I could make it. She's fine. You fine? Yeah, you're fine. Okay. So I was not sure I could make it today here because my husband is traveling for work. And her appointment to get her x-rays again and to get her cast was in Tyson's at 1:30. And I had to go there and make sure everything was all set and then find my way here. I'm not a very good directional driver person. So I was like, Natalie, you might have to do this yourself because this is such a mess. Anyway, it is broken. She's okay. She's got the cast, a blue one. It's very cool. We made it here, and now she's stuck listening to her mom. But that's just like a day, right? And that's no different from any other woman or parent or caregiver in any other profession. The thing that makes it different, though, for me to be able to do this job and for Natalie, and honestly, in this White House, and I can only speak to this one because as we've just discussed, it's my only one, there are so many women that we work with, and so many women that are leaders. Like, I honestly, and this is no BS, I can tell you every day I am in a meeting that there are more women, twice as many women than there are men, and they are the ones running everything. And that is a big deal. And it's a testament to the president, because the other thing he said, so if you roll all the way back to when I was deciding whether or not to go in the campaign in the first place, at that time my dad was sick, I had a 1-year-old, and I just didn't know I was gonna be up for it. And he said to me, look, let's figure out a way, if you can do this, we can make it work with your family. It is his credence that if you have a family thing, that takes precedence over everything else. And he really lived by that. He would never call me during bedtime. We would always talk afterwards or before, but he knew I had to take that time for the kids. I could even tell you, like, I want to say like it was probably a month ago, and we were putting my son in a different school, and so the head of school was doing a call with us, and like I had to get on it, and it couldn't just be my husband, and I was in a meeting in the Oval Office. And I was like, shit, this meeting's happening, like the president, and so I was like, sir, I'm sorry, I have to leave. He's like, what do you have to leave? And I said, well, my son, the school. He's like, don't tell me anymore, get out of here. And he was like, I would be more mad if you stayed in this meeting with me, even though it was important, than if you took care of your kid. And I think that more men have to say that, but more women, all of us, being able to build and do these things because we can all lean on each other, but there's no fear of bringing that up. And it's like something of honor to work through together, I think is like the way it is now, but we still need more and more of that. Yeah. Sorry about my TED Talk, but.
Okay, Natalie.
I got nothing to say.
You have your own messiness.
Yeah.
As a mom with So tell us.
Yeah, between us we have 6 kids, and we both have 3 for the math. I don't have 5. I think, as Jen said, we are so lucky to work honestly, in a White House where from the top down, people value family. And we value it in how we work and how people should be spending their time. And I've had similar experiences where you just need to go and everyone is accepting of the fact that you need to go. It doesn't mean you don't get back online later, because that's the job. But that is the expectation that you will take care of what you need to take care of with your family. I would say it's also in, obviously, how we govern. And we have a representation in our White House and across our government that attempts to the best of our ability to represent the people and the American people. And that's because as we make policy, we need moms and dads and other people at the table to say, this is how that policy would affect me and my family. And I remember really specifically during COVID, again, we keep going back to COVID, but it was so pivotal in all of our lives, we were rolling out the kids' vaccine. Mm-hmm. And there was a conversation, and I ran a lot of the operations on how we would roll out the vaccine and how we would get them with then Jeff Zients, who now is our chief of staff. And there's a big conversation about, well, where would parents want to take their little kids? I was like, well, I have a view here. And we did it so there was different places so parents would feel comfortable going. We did launch some big vaccination sites, which I was like, I will take my kid there tomorrow because I really want to go. And then my kids ended up going. My husband took them. But they went and got a vaccine at those sites. So I think it's not only in how we operate as a White House and as a government, which is very accepting of mothers, fathers, working parents, people who have elderly parents they need to take care of, whatever. But also, I think it's important in how we govern and how we make sure that we are taking care of all American families and we're building that into how we make decisions. And you can only really do that if you have people at the table making those policies and implementing those policies who have some lived experience and different lived experiences. And I think Jen and I would both say we are super lucky because we are able to do these jobs and have childcare and have all of these things in our lives that allow us to do hard jobs and have families. And not everybody has that. And so that's what we need to keep fighting for, and I think that this president does every day. Yeah.
What advice, Natalie, would you give to young women who hope to be, say, deputy chief of staff at the White House someday, but also have children and have a family?
I would say do it. you know.
Well, tell them when you had kids, though, when you were pregnant.
Yeah,
What were you doing?
I worked in six of the years. I worked in all 8 years of the Biden administration, but 6 of those years in the White House. And I had 2 kids in the last 4 years. And so it's really funny when we walked in the first day and I saw a lot of the Secret Service officers who are the same ones you saw, you know, throughout, and they're great people. And they were like, "You." And I was like, "Yeah, that was me, but I'm no longer this pregnant, that is." Because it was 4 years of having 2 kids. And so it was a little bit like some people were like, "Whoa, how are you gonna do this? Are you gonna stay working?" And I just said, "Well, I'm gonna try it. And if it doesn't work for me, then I won't do it anymore. But I'm gonna give it a go." And I would just say, give it a go. And if it doesn't work, change course.
Yeah. And my whole life was campaigns, right? So I've been on every presidential campaign for the last 20 plus years. And, you know, in campaigns, there aren't a lot of women. There's certainly there's more and more, but not a lot of women leaders. So when I was growing up in the business, you know, I really didn't have a lot of models. And so I had wonderful mentors. And I went to some of the women mentors when this was, you know, I've been married. My husband was in the White House, and then we were going to go work on the re-election campaign for Obama-Biden. And at the same time, I was thinking maybe I should have kids. I've not told this story to my daughter. But anyway, I talked to some of my mentors, and you know, and it was interesting by generation. But one was like, "Well, if you're interested in having a baby, just don't tell anyone." And then the other one said, "If you want to be on a campaign, you cannot have a kid. Are you crazy? How could you think of doing that?" And I heard from these 2 people that have done the work and that I had so much respect for, and I was like, how can that just be the answer? How can I not find a way here? And as Natalie said, I'm so lucky that I have a husband that is extremely extraordinary in his own ways, but he has taken a back seat professionally so I can do what I do and holds us all together. But I got advice from like someone that had nothing to do with professional work, and they just said there's never a right time, there's never a perfect time. And that became my mantra. And I was pregnant on a presidential campaign with twins, and I did have people look at me like I was a unicorn. And now there are more and more women doing that, and there needs to be more, and campaigns in particular are terrible for this because there's no support in childcare and it's a short amount of time. But I do think that it's really important for people to see that it's possible, but it's messy, and I ascribe to the RBG school of thought that you really can't have it all at once, but you can at different times, but you need to have a village, and you can carve it up however you want, but you gotta have them there to help you navigate it because it's always messy.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for sharing
Thank
your
you.
messiness
Yes.
with this audience. What a great conversation. So much to admire in both of you. Thank you for being here.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
Here to discuss women in media, please welcome Jacqueline Alemany, Congressional Investigations Reporter at The Washington Post, Laura Barrón-López, White House Correspondent for PBS NewsHour, and Tamara Keith, White House Correspondent for NPR, with Weijia Jiang, Senior White House Correspondent for CBS News.
Excited to be here because I have known these ladies for years. We've worked in the trenches together, and I hope this is an interesting conversation for you, especially today when things in Washington are really interesting, and we do have, I would say, a pretty critical role that I hope we can talk about. But I do want to start with sort of diving into the title of this session, which is Women in Media, because everywhere I look, there are prominent women in pretty, high, substantial roles in our industry, and I wonder if you think we've arrived for real, because it's not only about visibility and getting in the room, right? Because our currency is information. And in order to get that, we rely on sources. And if most of Washington is still, in many ways, a boys' club, are we able to have the same access? Do we really have the same opportunities as our male counterparts?
Sure, I'll start. I've been in DC as a journalist since 2013, so a decade now. And I started off more as a congressional reporter. So I was on the Hill a lot, and I would say that when I first started, there were not that many women, and there really weren't that many reporters of color at all. And so that would be sometimes frustrating when you would be standing in a scrum, probably the only woman, but then you add on the fact that you're the only person of color as well. And you could tell that there's kind of this unspoken camaraderie between the men, even if they are reporters, talking to male lawmakers, and sometimes lawmakers would prefer to talk to just who they're used to and have been used to for years, white men. I think there's also a groupthink that exists in newsrooms among men, and in particular white men, because that is a majority of men that are in newsrooms in DC. It has become more diverse. I've worked at an array of different newsrooms: The Hill, Huffington Post, Washington Examiner, Politico, now PBS NewsHour. And the newsrooms have become more diverse throughout my years here in Washington, but there is certainly, I think there's this misbelief that that somehow newsrooms have always been neutral, and that the white men that have led these newsrooms have always been objective and neutral. And it's like, no, they came to those jobs with a bias and with a life experience that was totally different than mine. And so they did have biases when they came into these roles in these newsrooms. And I think that the more diverse a newsroom is, the more we can break down the way things have always been done and start to do them in a way that is more reflective of the entire country.
I will say that there have been a few times in the press cabin on Air Force One where you look around and you go, ha, you're the only guy in this whole cabin. And it's great. It's not every time. Through time, more typically it has been, you're the only girl in the cabin. But I think often now we have times where the front row in the White House press briefing room is all women, or there's like, oh, that one token guy there. So I think that we have made progress in terms of being there. In terms of smoke-filled rooms and all of those things, like, yes, a lot of sourcing happens at bars and parties and happy hours that I don't go to because I want to see my kids. And yeah, that puts me at a disadvantage, I guess, but I actually want to see them. So that's a choice that I make. And the other thing I would say is that, like, as women in the press corps, we definitely stick together. We look out for each other. We have a different club. We've got pro tips about how to pump on Air Force One, for instance.
Which Tam gave me as soon as I got to the White House, and I was a newbie and also happened to be a new mom, and she came to me right away and said, you have to go to this booth, and this is where you're going to pump, and, thank you for that. Jackie,
somebody's got to do it.
and we appreciate it. So, Jackie, what about your experience? Do you think we're in a post-gender world when it comes to working in media in Washington?
I love the way you framed that question, because I think, Tamara, you're right. We're in the room, we're there. There's, no doubt, tons of women in media in high-powered positions. That's long overdue. But in terms of the gatekeepers of power and the people that we're sourcing with and interacting with on a daily basis, I would still say that's still overwhelmingly male. And I think that it can test you at times, and just, in various ways, especially in terms of your confidence and, sort of your ability to be fearless and ask questions. And Weijia, we were talking backstage, and Weijia just said that this is how she was going to start. And the first thing that came to mind was I had developed a source on an airplane. We were flying back and forth a lot during the Trump years from Palm Beach to DC and back to cover Trump at Mar-a-Lago. A Trump source was seated next to me on a flight. I felt like that was serendipitous. I was reading the Financial Times, so he turned and said, "Oh, you must be a journalist." I was at that point in time just trying to keep up with the extremely high metabolism of Trump news and a lot of just excellent peers who were breaking stories left and right. Took the opportunity to get this guy's card when we had a lot of sort of weird spare time in Florida when we were covering Trump and sort of waiting for him to arrive and depart different places all around the schedule of the news cycle. So I went and I grabbed a meal with this guy, and I saw him, I had my notebook out on the table with a pen, saw him lean down and then sit up and say, "Sweetheart, I don't need my Cialis anymore for this meeting, do I?" And
oh my God.
It was like, I was completely in shock. And obviously, I don't think that would have happened to a man. And I think, if not for, at that point in time, Weijia and I were actually working together, I think an experience like that would have been extremely rattling. It still was in that moment. I quickly sort of wrapped it up and ended up not really being in touch with him ever again, and found it extremely unsettling and disrespectful. But I think having people like Weijia in my corner and giving me the continued confidence to be who I was, ask questions, and keep trying to press sources, make sources, and try to sort of puncture that proximity to power makes a big difference.
And you certainly did. I was just telling Jackie how proud I was of her because when we were covering Trump together at CBS, she was a really dogged reporter, but just kind of starting out on her career, and to watch her grow and win a Pulitzer and break the story about the documents at Mar-a-Lago has just been amazing to watch. And I want to ask you, Jackie, about your work because you do cover congressional investigations, very different from the DOJ. But I wonder, given how many we are seeing, is like what's going on? Are elected officials just doing more bad stuff, or is it just a reflection of how polarized the environment has been, and now we're sort of seeing weaponization of these tools?
Yeah, it's a really good question because there are now countless indictments you can read of Democrats and Republicans, primarily Bob Menendez and Donald Trump, that include a litany of potentially criminal offenses. And you have to wonder how we got to a place where I think the rhetoric and the environment has become so degraded that politicians feel emboldened to engage in potentially criminal behavior, especially Bob Menendez, who is right off the heels of a 2018 charges that had been dismissed and then got right back into it, according to this latest indictment. I wish I was a social anthropologist at times on the Hill and I could understand why exactly why we have gotten here. It is a learning experience, but I will say I don't think it takes anyone who has, I guess, watched the news or spent any time on the Hill and in these circles, it's easy to see that it is not the same institution that it used to be, and that the relationships and the shared mission and purpose has really degraded and coarsened. And I think that's for a litany of reasons, but primarily because I think of the attention economy, the death of local media, the increased partisan warfare, and basically this no holds bar approach to doing politics at the expense of constituents at the end of the day.
I do think that scandals are almost more survivable now. Because, look at George Santos. There's a guy.
How did I forget that?
Right. But he just said, okay, I'm just going to keep showing up. And who's going to stop me? And no one stopped him because there are, partisan reasons for the party in power not to do anything. Certainly the last time Bob Menendez was indicted, there were partisan reasons for everyone not to call for him to resign. The circumstances are different now, and we'll see if it changes. But I think that there is an element in politics where if you can take the battering, if you can take the scrum of reporters following you around for a month or whatever, or staking out your house, if you can survive that, personally, then you're cool. They stop following you around. People stop talking about you. People forget to mention you. And you just sort of move on. I mean, there are so many people in Congress who had a scandal that in a different era would have taken them out. But because they're in safe seats, non-criminal scandals, personal scandals. And they just survive because they're willing to take a little bit of shame or they're shameless, and then they survive.
So surviving is one thing, thriving is another. And I think that I can't help but wonder, Laura, how you think that the current impeachment inquiry into President Biden, who we all cover together, is impacting the election, if at all, and sort of his image that until now has been pretty pristine when it comes to whether Joe Biden has ever done something wrong.
Yeah. House Republicans were saying before they even took the majority that they were going to impeach Joe Biden, so it was essentially inevitable that we ended up here based on what they were saying. There is no evidence that links the president to Hunter Biden's business dealings. There's no evidence that he took a bribe. The hours-long hearing that was conducted today provided no evidence. The Republican witnesses actually said that there was no evidence to impeach the president right off the bat, which the White House, of course, seized on because they have refuted all of the different allegations that Republicans have made. In addition to us in the press, we've doggedly looked into them. And there is no evidence that the president took a bribe or tried to use his influence to benefit his son. Now, Hunter Biden is a totally different story, which Democrats will admit. And what he did was questionable and ethically not sound, but they're like, he's not the president. When it comes to the impact on the election, I don't think it's had any impact so far on the electorate. And I've talked to swing voters in states like Arizona, ones who voted Republican up until 2020, decided to vote for Biden because of they were concerned about threats to democracy, and I've been checking in with them to see if they soured on the president, if there was something that they thought they could go back to in the Republican Party. And so far, those voters, those independent-minded, Republicans have said no. And when I've asked specifically about Hunter Biden, because they didn't bring him up, they said, I don't care about Hunter Biden, that there's no evidence. They said, now, of course, if somehow there is a smoking gun and there is evidence showing that President Biden did something wrong or illegal, then that would change their mind.
Sure.
And then I was just talking, you guys just maybe heard from Sarah Longwell, and I was talking to her, and she's a pollster who conducts focus groups, Never Trump Republican, and she also has found the same thing across her swing voter focus groups, which is that they do not care about Hunter Biden. They do not think the impeachment inquiry is valid, and that they, would rather the two parties be focused on things that are much more important to them.
But Tam, I want to ask you about the role of the press, because we can't, even though there is no evidence, we can't not cover it, right? I mean, you just finished your term as White House Correspondents Association president. Thank you for your service. It is a tradition for the outgoing president to call the newly elected president and losers. And so she called me, and I knew this call was coming, and she said, "Hi, I'm calling with condolences." And I'm like, "Oh, that's fine. Like, good race." And she took too long of a pregnant pause, and then she said, "Because you won." And so thanks for that.
See, you'll never forget the moment you found out you won the sweepstakes to be WHCA president in 2025?
Which will be a tricky year, perhaps, who knows, but either way, whoever is president, it's always tricky, right? Because we want as much access as possible. And we want to be able to do that because we have to be the vehicle between whatever chaos we're observing, whatever policies we're following, to the public. So what role do you think the press has in a time right now when there is so much noise and it's really difficult to separate the facts from the political frenzy?
Yeah, I mean, we're in this incredibly difficult time where trust in every U.S. institution is at pretty much an all-time low, and we are not immune to that. trust in the media is really bad. We're near pond scum, and in terms of approval. And I think that, and also people are in their news silos. And so what we're doing in our mainstream outlets may never reach people who are consuming information from other outlets, or who say, I don't trust the media, I trust these people on YouTube. They speak the truth because they are citizen journalists. And they're just like people on YouTube who have, it's not like, I mean, we have training, but it's not like the training is the important part. We have standards. We, like, if I screw something up, I have to run a correction. And it's down to like specific words. Everything matters that we do. And so I think that what we have to do is keep doing what we do, which is reporting the truth, not being afraid to say they have no evidence. And I think 10 years ago, that might have been hard for a lot of journalists to say, because that would have felt like we were putting our hand on the scale and we need to let people decide. And I think now we're in a place where we can analyze what we've seen, what is being said, and say with confidence, in that case, right now, so far, they haven't presented any evidence that ties the president to the wrongdoing of his son.
I think also, there is objective truth.
Yeah.
And when we present stories, we're not just going to say a Republican said X, a Democrat said Y. We can investigate the way Jacqueline does and discover what the truth is. Countless outlets have investigated the allegations to figure out if they are true or not. And they aren't when it comes to saying that this was the president that benefited from this. And so, to your question of what role we play, I mean, I feel like I think a lot about what Christiane Amanpour, another woman who has paved the way for a lot of us, has been saying, be truthful, not neutral. And that's kind of like what my guiding light is right now. I also think that the reason that the trust in institutions, whether it's the government or the press, is so low right now is because there is a significant number of Republican lawmakers, including the GOP frontrunner, the former president, who has made it their mission to say that the press is the enemy of the people, and to say that you cannot trust any of the federal government institutions across the board, not just the Justice Department. That is why the Republican base right now thinks that all of federal government is evil and that it's weaponized, is because that is what they hear time and time again from Trump and his allies.
Jackie, you covered January 6th extensively, and I wonder if you think that was a turning point where things are at their lowest point when it comes to this seeking of the truth, which I think people used to come to the media, come to news outlets for information, and now it's for confirmation of previous biases they already hold. January 6th unfolded because they held a belief, even though that belief was not true. So how do you think January 6th sort of reshaped the landscape, not only for politics and the upcoming election, but for what we do?
It's interesting. I was just thinking about this because I was researching sort of the history of impeachments and how this impeachment in particular is really anathema to what the framers envisioned when they created the impeachment mechanism in the Constitution. And actually, press faith and trust in media was at an all-time high in 1972 when Gallup first surveyed the American public, and that was right on the heels of Watergate, after two dogged Washington Post reporters uncovered what Nixon exactly was up to. And I think it was 72% of Americans had trust and faith in media and what mainstream media was reporting. And I was wondering why we didn't have that kind of bump after January 6th. And I do have a little bit of a theory about the media literacy issues that we have, and I think it's just that. Media literacy rates are just as low as trust in the press. It's not taught in schools. People don't know how to read a newspaper. They don't know how to find facts. They don't know how to use Google properly. I don't think it's prioritized in schools. I think it all sort of leads back to some fundamental basic issues and inequities in the American education system, particularly public education, and that all comes to a head with our jobs in particular. And just as information is the coin of the realm and the currency that we traffic in, so is trust, and that's something that the Washington Post has been really conscientious of as we're trying to expand and reach people outside of what I think a lot of people perceive that we try to reach, which is the coastal elite. But that's why I think newsletters are such a great tool, because you can be a little bit more conversational. You can connect with a reader. We're all trying to explore different ways to reach new audiences and to try to break out of these silos, because there are a handful of media outlets that have, at the end of the day, sort of exploited the system and the original concepts of the original boundaries of journalistic objectivity in order to propagate conspiracy theories and lies. And obviously those have all taken root. And my last point is really just, on this whole conversation about objectivity. I was also sort of went into this rabbit hole looking at impeachment, but the whole concept was actually created by a group of 13, the concept of journalistic objectivity was created by a group of 13 white men in 1943, because trust in media, while there wasn't an official Gallup poll, it was struggling. And these men sort of came together and decided they needed to prop up the press because it was important to holding our democracy together. So I think it's only natural that the definition of objectivity would evolve. But I think at the end of the day, objectivity and truth and fairness should all be one in the same. Those things should not be at odds with each other.
We are sadly out of time, but I do want to end or leave a final thought, because I always say, yes, we have a responsibility, we have a role to play, but so does the news consumer. Yeah. So if you could just, what would you tell a news consumer who is hungry to try to understand what's going on? What should their role be? What can they do to make sure, that they are getting information and not confirmation?
So I would say have a diverse news diet, which is to say don't only listen to NPR, don't only read the Washington Post, read that Wall Street Journal editorial page, get out of your bubble. And I think probably the most important thing you can do is from time to time, turn off the cable, turn yourself, stop focusing only on national politics and look locally. Look to your local community, your local paper, pay attention to your school board race and your city council race and these sort of elements of your community, because sort of all of our institutions link together. And I think that the sport of national politics these days, it truly has replaced football for some people, and I just because football has issues, but I think that I just truly think that because it's become such a hobby and such an obsession, that we are struggling to see our neighbors for who they are, and struggling to just see people as people. And so I think that's an important thing to do. I know that doesn't necessarily restore trust in the press, but I think it is important for our social fabric.
Watch the PBS NewsHour.
Yes, it's the best.
No. And read Jacqueline, and listen to Tamara, and watch Weijia. No, but I guess what I would just say is that I feel as though people forget that we're people too. And I got into this not with some political agenda. I became a journalist, and this is what I try to tell people, even voters sometimes, when they ask me, like, what's your agenda? I don't have one, but here's what my mission is. My mission is that I am in this to hold powerful people accountable, no matter what your party is. So if a Democrat is lying, I'm going to say a Democrat is lying. If a Republican is lying, I'm going to say a Republican is lying. And that is my guiding light to get you the best information and the most accurate and truthful information as possible. And I'm not going to mince words about it, and I'm going to use as direct language as possible, cut out all the jargon. And that's why I got into this, because I do feel as though journalists are incredibly important to this democracy, which is under threat, being able to survive.
And I'll keep it brief because these two are on deadline for their evening broadcasts. Trust but verified.